Project Management, Chapter 7. So in Chapter 17, we talk about risk management. So risk is any uncertainty we have in a project, something that we can't control or don't know what could potentially happen. So there's just an example of some of the possible risks, like what can go wrong, that's the risk event. How do we minimize the risk event's impact? So can we plan for any certain risk? What can be done before this risk event occurs? And what can be done when this risk event occurs? So how do we develop a contingency plan to deal with that? So we have high and low risk. High risk of things occurring and low risk of things occurring. As we go across the project life cycle, the chance of a risk occurring goes from high to low. And the longer the project life cycle, the more likely that there could be risks along the line, and the cost to fix those risks gets greater and greater as it goes down the line. The example the textbook uses is a 1999 project that NASA had, and they had a technical issue with Lockheed Martin and their GPS monitors. So if they had caught that technical issue in the early stages of the project, it would have been very expensive to fix and it would have been easy to correct. However, they didn't catch it until after the project, the probe to Mars, had already launched and failed its launch. Then it was extremely high cost. It's easier to catch things in the planning and prototype than it is and it's lower cost if we catch them during that than if we catch them either after that, so we're already in full production, or even later when we've sent stuff out to a customer and find that there are technical issues with it. So risk management benefits give us a proactive rather than a reactive approach. Now, it's impossible to plan for any possible risk. For example, the derecho this summer in Iowa. That was a very random event that no one would have predicted. And so we couldn't have created a contingency plan for that. But we're used to flooding in Iowa. So if we were planning an outdoor project in Iowa, we might have had a proactive approach knowing that a common risk in the summer in Iowa is flooding. So it helps to reduce the cost and the negative consequences that come with risk. It doesn't help us completely eliminate risk, but it gives us better control over those risks. It also improves the chances of us reaching our project goals within our budget and on time. When we're looking at the risk management process, we go through these 4 steps. First, we identify the risks. What are all of the possible risks of this project? And we brainstorm as a project management team to try to come up with anything that's possible as far as risks. Every project is going to have its different kind of risk. A road construction project is going to have different risk management than building a new building, for instance. Then we assess those risks in terms of severity of impact, likelihood of occurring, and how able we are to control that event. It's difficult for us to control when natural disasters happen, such as a tornado comes through or a hurricane that comes through. But we can control for, like I said earlier, the fact that there's flooding in Iowa. Then we develop a risk response. What strategy are we going to have to reduce any possible loss or cost or project delay from that possible risk? And what contingency plan can we put in place? Maybe we just have some turnover within our project management team. Do we have a hiring pipeline or a contingency plan for if someone leaves the team and we need to replace them? Do we have those people available within our system, or are we going to have to contract out? Same things with if we have a technical product, we could have secondary suppliers. So what happens if something happens to our regular supplier and they can't get us the goods we need? Do we have a backup supplier as a contingency plan? And then we have our risk response. When that risk actually occurs, how do we monitor and adjust for it? So when we're managing risk, we create these risk breakdown structures along with our work breakdown structure to identify and analyze risk. First, we look at the macro or high level potential risks. We could be hit with a hurricane. We could have a flood. And then we look for specific events that are going to be just on that project. We generate a full list of possible risks, and then we're going to look at the possibility of them occurring. So here is an example of a risk breakdown structure for a project. We have technical, external, organizational, and project management risks. So technical risks could be, what are availabilities of technology? Is it going to do what we need it to do? We're going to have quality issues. External, weather, customers, regulatory issues, organizational issues. What are the resources that we need for this project? Is our funding secure? What's the prioritization of this project within the organization? And then the own project. What is our estimate for the project? How good are we able to estimate the future costs? Remember when we talked in earlier earlier chapters, the bigger a project and the longer the project, the more difficult it is to estimate the time and cost for it. We have all of these different questions we can ask while we're making this risk profile for a project. So how well is our staff prepared? Will we need to test things? And if we do need to test things, do we have the things available for testing when that comes along? What are our quality considerations? Who has authority for what? That's a huge one. Who makes decisions? And who's responsible for those decisions? Is the schedule dependent upon the completion of other projects? Are we waiting for things? How reliable are our cost estimates? These are just some examples of the risk questions that we're going to be asking ourselves. Once we have that list of risks, then we're going to analyze what their event probability is and what the impact would be. So we make this risk severity matrix where we look at the impact times the probability times detection. It's called the FMEA. We also have different probability analysis that we can do, statistical analysis, decision trees, net present value analysis, and PERT analysis that can be performed to analyze what is the probability of various risks happening. So when we make this matrix, we're going to say if it's a relatively low or high impact. And here we have a whole range of impacts for a project. So the cost, we have a very low probability that we would have an insignificant cost increase. And then very high that there's a 40% cost increase or greater. So these are looking at negative impacts only for scope, cost, time, and quality. Then we look at what is the likelihood, what is the impact, and how difficult is it to detect whether or not that's going to happen, and when within the project can that happen. So this is looking at some software things. We could have hardware malfunctioning. We could have user backlash. The system could freeze up. We could have interface issues. So we create this risk assessment form and then develop red zone, yellow zone, and green zone. So what are major risks? what are moderate risks, and then what are minor risks. So our major risks are that we could have interface problems and systems freezing. So those are the first two risks that we want to mitigate because there are major risks. We want to have contingency plans available for those risks.